Lacey County Zoning Board is here for appeals review of Lacey County Zoning Case SU-714, Pleasant Ridge Energy LLC, Pleasant Ridge Wind Energy Project. Michael Cornell, John Ditzel here, Richard Keeper, Diana Iverson, Howard Zimmerman, Joe Houston, Gibbs Hansen.
I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening. Finally got some sunlight, kind of bright in here. It's a little different feel here tonight with the sun shining in. So, there's a few housekeeping items we need to take care of this evening. Some of it deals with some exhibits. I guess first and foremost, there's some scheduling questions or issues that we need to solve. And what else have we got? There's a few statements that we need to clarify or get out there so that everybody understands. We're on our 21st night of these hearings, and we're looking to obviously finish this process up. As we looked at the calendar last time, we threw out a few dates towards the end of the month. We're probably going to look at changing those dates up, the 30th and 31st. At this point, we're probably going to take them back out of the schedule. It does conflict with some spring break vacations, I know, for myself and a few other people, so I'll take some of the heat on that one. But we're going to try to squeeze something in the week of the 23rd through the 27th. As we go through tonight, after break, I'll have a more definitive answer on that, what night we're looking at. We're probably looking around about the 25th, but we need to make sure we have enough people to have a meeting for that evening. You will see that tonight we're actually not meeting in quorum per se. Our rules specifically state in our procedural hearings that we can operate with less than a quorum for these hearings just because of the length and the duration of them. So, I'll take it. We're getting to the point where the public is going to be able to, just like as we've seen for the last few nights, members from the community are able to address the board. We're really looking at trying to get everybody signed up that is interested in addressing the board. So we're going to try to put a definitive, I guess, deadline on signing up for that. I can't tell you exactly the evening on that, but it's coming up soon, and I definitely will tell you that what night will be the final night for that. Having said that, starting next week, the 16th and the 18th, we really need to make sure that if you do plan on testifying in front of this board, that you are ready to go. We will call your name. If you're not here, if you're not ready, we're going to move through you. We'll come back through, but we can only pass and move past you so many times. If we get through the whole list and you aren't ready to go, and we're through the entire list, you will have missed your opportunity. So if we come back through that second time and get all the way down through the list, you're not ready. So I don't like to have that closure, but at the same time, we do need to keep these meetings moving along. So, let's see. Next thing we should do, Chuck, you have a few things that we need to talk about.
Okay, we do have a couple of reports that we've been waiting for. The first one is referred to as the Pleasant Ridge Wind Farm Natural Resource Information Report. This is from the Lacey County Soil and Water Conservation District. We'll have this marked as Lacey County Soil and Water Conservation District Exhibit 1, and we'll pass copies of that out. And then, in addition to that, we do have the short report from the Planning Commission, from the Lewis County Regional Planning Commission when we reviewed this. And I attached a copy of the minutes to that meeting also. And I believe our next exhibit to the county is 11, so it'll be marked as Lewis County Exhibit number 11.
All right. Just so that we can keep the record and the exhibit list clean during this whole procedural hearing, I'm going to have to go through about probably 25 documents here real quick. Guys, just bear with me on this. I'll do my best to get through them. So the county will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 123. All right. The county rejects Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 123, deemed past the scope of the witness that presented. All right, the county rejects Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 124, economic impact, determined past the scope of the witness asked to testify. The county will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 300, two-page article from energy.gov, titled BP 100, Illinois Wind Farm Breathes New Life into Businesses. The county will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 301 from the Illinois Wind Energy Group, two-page document from American Wind Energy Association. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 304 as a several-page document entitled Ex Post Analysis of Economic Impacts from Wind Power Development in U.S. Counties. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 305 as a vitae from Gruen and Associates, examples of our work. County will accept UCLC Exhibit 60 as a resume of Aaron Nathaniel Gruen, several-page vitae. County will accept UCLC Exhibit 61 as the comments, findings, and conclusions of our report by David G. Loomis, PhD, of Strategic Economic Research, LLC, entitled Economic Impact of the Pleasant Ridge Wind Energy Project. County will accept UCLC Exhibit 62, May 2013 document from Goldwind, the economic and fiscal benefits of the Shady Oaks Wind Farm. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 242 as several comments from a social media society about a witness that spoke. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 314 as Illinois Wind Watch 4-page correspondence. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 315 as the official proceedings of the County Board of Iroquois County, Illinois recess session, February 8, 2011. County will accept UCLC 80 as a participation in considerations of the Pleasant Ridge Wind Farm. Looks like it's the document that followed the ZARE presentation. Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 175 is the MAI designation requirements for general candidates for designation. Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 176 will accept is the AI Designations Appraisal Institute nomenclature descriptors. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 178 as the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practices 2014-2015 edition. It looks like it's probably an excerpt from that. It's all the, it's several excerpts from that particular manual. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 175 as a testimony from proceedings, State of Illinois, County of DuPage before the public hearing officer, application for local siting approval, proposed Fullerton Waste Transfer Station.
Mr. Chairman, I think you might have said 175. I think that was
179, but the records indicate 179. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 180 as a transcript from legal proceedings between McCann and Strong. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 186 as the JUWI Wind Prairie Breeze Wind Farm LLC, Tipton County, Indiana. Property value impact and zoning compliance evaluation. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 187 as the McCann Appraisal, April 15, 2013, letter to the United States House of Representatives Committee on Ways and Means. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 189 as the McCann Appraisal submittal dated September 30th, 2013 to a Ms. Esther Reitman, sent via email, a human species habitat witness statement. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 196 of the 2013 Illinois Land Values and Lease Trends. Several page document, 100 in total, Illinois farmland values. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 197A as the impact of industrial wind turbines on residential property assessment in Ontario, 2012 assessment base year study. I'm getting there. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 197 as the resale analysis, 197B, resale analysis, Linsink and MPAC. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 201 as the response to Appraisal 1, wind turbine impact study, and testimony of Kurt Keelish. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 202 as the SRA designation requirements for residential candidates for designation. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 207 as Illinois Code 225 ILCS 458/10-10. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 208 as the Illinois Administrative Code 68 1455.240 Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 243 as the submittal from Lee County Pair Sales Analysis, Lee County, Illinois Property Record Card. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 244 as the DeKalb, Illinois paired sale documentation. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 245 as Livingston County pair sales tax year 2013 sales data. County will accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 246 as the Livingston County paired sales data, parcel 1313-18-200-005. The county does not accept Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 247 as a submittal from Joan Bullard Realty dated February 16, 2015. All right, I think we made it through that stack pretty good.
Mr. Chairman, there is one other item that's not on your list, and Mr. Blakeman has copies of it. I talked about this with Mr. Lucahen's before we began. Mr. Maroos, our appraiser, who will be coming once we determine when we'll be putting on our rebuttal case, has prepared a formal appraisal review report, which we marked as Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 311, and we propose to hand it out. I emailed it to all the attorneys, including Mr. Lucahen's yesterday, which is when we received it. So everybody has an opportunity. It's a lengthy report, and we thought it made sense for everyone to have it in advance. And you can rest assured Mr. Maroos will be coming in to speak about that report when our rebuttal opportunity presents itself. So it would be Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 311, Maroos Appraisal Review Report.
All right, I guess, and we've done this in the past, and I guess I'll probably just kind of stick with what we've done. If you hand out the report, fine, and we'll take it when he's here.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all I wanted to do for today was just put on the record that we had handed it out.
Okay.
Obviously, we wanted to give Mr. Lucahen as much time as possible in advance of rebuttal to the extent we can.
Okay. Just so long as you understand that in no way we've accepted it, rather we've taken it, and when he's here to discuss it, we'll further talk about that.
Understood.
Okay. Mr. Lucahen, does that seem agreeable?
Yes.
All right, the next thing that we need to discuss, and this is going to be in brevity, I think that we need to just talk briefly about the RAND report, what the fate of the RAND report is. From what I see clearly, the applicant is looking to have that disallowed. Mr. Lucahen, I believe in the effort of this process, we obviously need to give you enough time to respond to this motion. I believe you have the motion in hand. Is that something that you'd like to take the time to further look into?
Yes.
All right.
Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, I did transmit it by email to all the attorneys, Mr. Lucahen's, Mr. Blakeman, and Mr. Griffin yesterday. Obviously, we have no objection to Mr. Lucahen's taking some time to, given the seriousness of the issue, we obviously don't object to him taking some time to file a response.
Okay, so realistically though, we can look at, can we have something by the 16th of March in regard to that, your written response to that, Mr. Lucahen?
Yes, I advised Mr. Blakeman today that we would produce that at the hearing on the 16th.
Okay, all right, and then we'll make a decision at the following meeting. We'll consider both sides, and we'll further discuss it. So with that, I think that's all our housekeeping items for the night. All right, I've got a list in front of me of individuals that I believe would like to testify this evening. So we'll go ahead and call our first witness. Are these either of your side's witnesses, or do you represent either of these or any of these?
I believe the only ones I represent on this list for tonight is Don Slagle.
All right.
Those are people who are in the public wishing to testify.
Okay, all right. So at this point, I'll go ahead and call Whitney Bell. Whitney Bell, available this evening. Why don't we do one at a time? I believe you're Brian Bell. Okay, are you going to actually testify separately, or is this a...
It's kind of a family thing.
It's a thing?
Separate statement.
Yeah, I was actually going to go first.
Okay.
If anybody does it,
Come on up. You can go first. We'll swear the whole family in all at once and we'll get this taken care of. Yeah, you bet.
and the kids may want to say something, I don't know, if that's fine.
All right. Can you guys please raise your right hand? We're doing good. All right. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give in this case now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right. If you two want to state your name and address for the record, and then you can go ahead with your statement as you know.
My name is Brian Bell. I live at 27496 East, 600 North Road, Forest, Illinois.
I'm Whitney Bell, and I reside in the same residence.
As I said, my name is Brian Bell. My wife and I live 2 miles south of Forest. I was born and raised in Forest, and I hope to raise my family there too. In October 2013, we bought a home in the country. I thought it would be a great place to raise our growing family. Our neighbors raise hogs and owns a small trucking company, and we were fully aware of this when we moved into the property. When we heard the wind farm was proposed to be in our neighborhood, we were a little disappointed. I worked full-time for the Village of Forest from 2010 to 2014 in the water, sewer, and street department. There was only 3 of us.
Could you get a little closer to the mic, and they're not being
Okay, sorry about that. Is that better? Okay. Let's see, I'll just start over. In October 2013, we bought a home in the country. We thought it'd be a nice place to raise our growing family. Our neighbor raises hogs and also has a small trucking company there, and we were fully aware of that when we moved into the property. When we heard that the wind farm was coming, was proposed to be in our neighborhood, we were very disappointed. I worked full-time for the Village of Forest from 2010 to 2014 in the water, sewer, and street department. There was only 3 of us working there at the time, and I knew nothing about the proposed wind farm coming to our area. The secrecy around the project took away my right to make an informed decision when I purchased my home 17 months ago. I lived in Forest, and I probably wouldn't have moved to the country knowing we were going to have windmills that close. We would have probably waited and seen what happened and then maybe moved somewhere else. Upon reviewing some of the standards, especially use what the ZBA provided, I saw some areas that were not complied. First, the application is not consistent in all respects with Livingston County Comprehensive Plan and Livingston County's local ordinance. Second, with all the health issues that have been brought into evidence, with some people testifying here, I thought the project could potentially be detrimental to endanger public health, safety, and the general welfare. Third, the standard says that the project should not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity. If anyone in my household has any health issues caused by the turbines, the whole family will be affected, and we will have to sell our home in order to protect our family should the noise or infrasound be a problem for any one of us, especially the children. And I say if. We would most likely be selling our property for less than we paid for it, and this is a huge potential concern. Another concern, I deal the fact that I am a migraine sufferer. Luckily, I don't have many of them, but that could change if the wind farm was put into place. The light flicker caused by the rotation of the turbines could easily trigger a migraine. Not to mention, infrasound could also possibly trigger one too. It is my job to protect my family and to provide a happy, healthy environment for them. When I was in Ethiopia, Africa, for the adoption of my 2 sons, the judge looked at me and asked me if I would do whatever we needed to do to take care and protect these children. My answer was yes then, and it is yes today. The wind turbines could disturb our family, peace, and injure our health, and and we could be permanently hurt by this. And we could be permanently hurt by this financially also. We are here to protect our family. And with all due respect, I hope the county board is here to protect us. Thank you.
Okay, like I said, I'm Whitney Bell, and I'm Brian's wife. I too grew up in Forest. As you've already heard, Brian and I moved to a nice, quiet home in the country recently. It has just under 4 acres around it. All 5 of our children love our home. From playing board games inside, to riding bikes and playing basketball outside. From collecting our chickens' eggs, to fleeing from the roosters that are chasing them. From getting into the pasture and petting the goat, to feeling our Jersey's round belly as she prepares to give birth this spring. From loving on the barn kitties to horsing around with our giant dog. We homeschool our children, so there is no limit to the time they spend at home with us, enjoying family life. We are incredibly blessed and thankful to be living where we live. The quietness, peace, and freedom have been such a wonderful change from living in town. I was deeply concerned for many reasons when I heard about the proposed wind farm. The first reason, it's not terribly important, but it has to do with the spectacular views we have. That is one of the blessings of living in the country. There is nothing like it. We cringe at the thought of looking out our bay window and having our beautiful sunset littered with gigantic wind turbines. Nor do we want to look outside at night and feel like we live by an airport with all the red lights. Sorry, I forgot to pass out my Alright, so if you guys could just look at Exhibit 1, it's a photograph of the southwest view from the bay window in our kitchen where we spend the majority of our time. It is possible that we could have up to 18 turbines obstructing this view, and 12 of those turbines will have red lights. But the main reason of my concern and the reason that I'm standing up here tonight is the possible health impact these turbines could have on my family. Our home is within the proposed footprint, and there will be a turbine in a neighboring field roughly 2,100 feet from our home. Exhibit number 2, it's page 34 of Invenergy's Pleasant Ridge Wind Energy Project County application. It shows our home in relation to the nearest turbine. I have read studies and watched testimonies, specifically public comment from the August 13, 2013 Vermilion County, Illinois board meeting. And I am aware that these turbines will cause noise issues, possibly impact our sleep, and maybe even cause headaches and nausea. During my research, I read a letter by William Mulvaney, the superintendent of schools of Armstrong, Illinois, written to the chairman of the Vermilion County Board. In this letter, Mr. Mulvaney stated that he has noticed some children in his district appear to be having some medical issues related to the wind turbines, listing headaches, lack of sleep, and jaw issues as the most common. He also notes that some families were leaving because they could no longer handle the flicker and the noise issues. Exhibit number 3 is a copy of that letter. We also received a copy of the letter of caution by Robert Rand. Am I allowed to talk about that? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, given the pending motion, I don't think that would be appropriate.
Here, Mr. Blazer's motion moves to strike any reference to it, so I think it's appropriate to at least have a talk, unless you want her to have to come back at some later date. If Mr. Blazer's motion is granted, then, you can do whatever you want, but until that time, I think it's at least appropriate to have her testify since she's here.
All right. What's going to happen is you can discuss it. We're going to allow that at this point. Whatever the determination is as we go through your transcript, this transcript may end up being redacted. These statements may be taken out. But we'll get through it tonight. Okay.
Sounds good. Sorry. We have also received a copy of the letter of caution by Robert Rand, a well-known acoustician. He has reviewed the Pleasant Ridge Wind Farm application. I've marked our home on one of the maps we created, and it is in a dangerous area. And that is page 8 of Exhibit 4 that I provided you. The noise level is predicted to be above the World Health Organization's recommended sleep disturbance threshold, and also predicting increasing adverse health impacts in the population. So that tells me there's a good chance someone in my family may be negatively affected by the turbines. Since these turbines are permanent and will not go away, the only solution for us would be to uproot our family and move elsewhere. We love our community and we have strong ties here. Our families are here, our friends are here, and our children are very happy here. Another study that I've provided, which is Exhibit 5, is the Cape Bridgewater Pacific Hydro study out of Australia. It's actually Dr. Schomer's review of that study. Dr. Schomer is one of the most highly regarded acousticians. And he stated when he reviewed the study that wind farms will be in the position where they must say we may affect some people. And regulators charged with the protecting the health and welfare of the citizenry will not be able to say they know of no adverse effects. Rather, if they choose to support the wind farm, they will do so knowing that they may not be protecting the health and welfare of all the citizenry. This appears to be a violation of the standards of special use, the county's comprehensive plan, and even Illinois law. The way I understand this, that if the county board votes yes on this issue, they're doing this knowing that they may not be protecting the health and welfare of the citizens. In my opinion, there is no financial interest or gain worth putting our family at risk or sacrificing the health of anyone else in the community. On behalf of our family and all the other families who may be affected, please vote no on this project. Thank you.
All right, do we have any questions for either of the bells? All right. Oh.
Hello, my name is Verna Bell. I am 9 years old and I live with my mom and dad in the country, of course. I'm opposed to the windmill project. One reason is that I don't want to see the lights at night. Another reason is that they make noise. I heard the noise when I went on a tour of a wind farm last September with other homeschool families. It sounded like a whooshing noise. I can't imagine having to hear the noise all the time. The wind turbines are also known to affect families and animals, and I am very worried about the effect the windmills may have on our animals. Lastly, I don't want to see our beautiful views be destroyed. I'm very blessed that God gave us our home, and I don't want to move because I love our beautiful home. Please don't approve this project. Thank you.
Any units of local government with questions for the bells? Anybody? Other interested parties represented by council, applicant, or Mr. Lupians, do you have any questions of the bells?
Yeah, just a couple. Either Mr. or Mrs. Bell, whatever is easiest. Do you actually farm or sell any livestock that you raise on the farm, on your home?
No,
And I'm sorry, did you say how big your property was again?
3.72 acres.
Thank you.
Mr. Blazer, do you have anything?
No, sir.
All right. Other interested parties from the audience? Any questions out there for the bells from the audience? Anybody? All right. Any county staff? Do we have anything that didn't come up? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Good job out there. All right, next on the list, Don Schlegel. Schlegel, are you here this evening? Mr. Schlegel, will you be sworn in? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give in this case and on hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name and address for the court reporter and go ahead with your statement.
Don Slagle. The address is 13113 North, 2500 East Road, Fairbury.
Mr. Slagle, I have handed you what has been previously labeled, and then I think in evidence is Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 16B. Do you know what receptor number you are in Dunridge's application?
241.
Okay. If you go to the first page of 16B, can you find receptor 241 on there for me?
Yes,
Okay, it lists you as a non-participant, is that correct?
that's correct.
And it also, can you tell us what the 1,000 hertz level is for your property on the first page, which is the 1.79-100 turbine level?
40.6.
Okay. And if I go to the third, I guess it's page 1 of 2, is the third actual page. That's the GE 1.72-103. Can you tell me what you're listed as, the 1,000 hertz there?
$41.1.
Now, if you go to, these aren't really numbers, and I apologize for that, but if you go to the last 2 pages, let's start on the first of the last 2. It doesn't have a page number, and it's not quite as pretty as the prior ones, and it's pretty small, so I'll apologize to that. But if you look down, again, this is the 100 meter blade. This is after the LNTE blades have been, if they're added. And your receptor number 241, you see that at the 1,000 hertz level, you're at 41.0 decibels?
Yes.
Okay. And if you go to the next page, the 103 meter blade, at 1,000 hertz, I think you're at 40.9, is that correct? You see that?
Is that on the last page?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Who do you live at this property with?
My wife and one son, he's not off in college.
Okay, so he's in college years?
Yes.
Or is college age?
He's home, so he lives with us sometimes. But
And how many acres is your property there?
3.
Do you know how many turbines are proposed to be within 1 mile of your home?
8.
Do you know how many turbines are proposed to be within 1.5 miles of your home?
Yeah, that'd be 12.
Okay, do you know what directions those turbines are in?
The east, northeast, west, northwest, southeast, and southwest. Everywhere but straight north and straight south for about 0.5 miles. All 3 if we have it to the south.
Showing you what has been marked as UCLC Exhibit 122. This is an aerial from Google Earth. Is that your house located on there?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And it's where the red dot is?
Correct.
And And do you know where Willa Burkhardt is?
Yes, I do.
Is she very close to you, or?
She's a few miles, but I grew up there where she lives.
Okay, do you know how many turbines are proposed to be within a mile of her home?
I'm thinking it's around 7.
Okay. The property at 13113 North 2500 East Road where you live, do you farm the land located at that particular parcel on those 3 acres?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you farm the land surrounding the property you live on?
Yes, some of it.
Okay. You don't actually own the property around?
No.
Okay. So you like sharecrop it, or?
Yes.
Do you operate any type of business out of the land at 13113 North 2500 East Road?
Not really. I just use the shed for some machinery.
Okay. What shed, what shed is that?
That'd be the one to the far west.
Okay. How far is that shed from your house?
It's about 200 feet.
Okay. Can you tell us approximately how many feet there are between your home and the property line on the east?
75.
Can you tell us how much land there is between your house and the property line on the south? Approximately feet.
Oh, it's probably about this, maybe 100.
100 feet.
Probably.
Okay. What, if anything, is to, okay. Other than that one shed, are the rest of those sheds utilized for your own personal use or for?
Yes.
Okay. So, other than the storage in the one shed of some farm equipment, you utilize the property at 13113 North 2500 East Road as a residence for just you and your family, nothing else?
That's correct.
Nothing further, thank you.
Do we have any questions at this time for Mr. Schlegel? All right. Units of local government, anybody out there? The applicant, do you have any questions, Mr. Schlegel?
Just, Mr. Slagle, I'm sorry, if you could just, on this picture, because it's really not clear, because it's kind of at a 10,000 foot level. The building to the far west, is that the shed you were talking about?
Yes, it is.
What's the white roof building immediately to the south?
To the south,
Yeah.
that's just a shop and some storage for some personal items and things like that.
And then is the one to the north your house?
That is a barn that we were thinking about on the main floor downstairs, making it into like a recreational room and things like that. But, I'm not sure if we're going to now. Probably not.
So it's a barn?
Yes.
And then,
So it's empty.
all right, it's just hard for me to see. Where is your house on your actual residence?
Well, you can see the lane coming in from the road on the east, and it'd be right to the south side of that.
The one with the darker roof?
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Anybody from the audience have a question for Mr. Schlegel? Anybody out there? A question? Mr. Hommings has a question. Please state your name for us, and then you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, Don, Patrick Arms, Forest. Just a real quick question. You brought up Mrs. Berkler that lives up there. You brought up your home place where you grew up. Have you sold that place, your home place, or?
No, it's in the family.
It's in the family. Is there potential turbines on that ground?
Yes, there is. When my father signed up, he was told, like other people, that there were going to be, everybody around him was signed up, and it ends up he's the only one in that section, and the rest of the family would like to get out of the contract now if they could.
Good. No further questions.
Any other interested parties with any questions of Mr. Schlegel? Anybody? County staff? Do we have anything? All right, thank you. Nancy Homerding. Please be sworn in. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give in this case on here shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right. Please state your name and address for our court reporter, and you can go ahead with your statement.
My name is Nancy Homerding, and I live at 27592 East, 1100 North Road in Forest. My family and I have lived there for 19 years. We have 5 acres. We are unfortunately in the footprint of the wind turbine project. I will have several turbines around me, with the closest to the southwest and the southeast, with several of the connecting lines buried in the field south of my property. My first concern was when I heard the wind turbines were coming in, and they wanted to build such a sizable and invasive project. Why didn't they inform everyone in the footprint? If the company wanted to be or have such good neighbors, you would first need to be a good neighbor. A good neighbor would have informed every neighbor affected, not just those they need to complete the project. Secondly, even though I am against the project, I try to attend these meetings with an open mind. As I listened to the experts, when they were questioned on the reports, I felt the reports didn't reflect our area. For example, the real estate facts were drawn from information closer to the Chicagoland area than to the central Illinois area. And as in for decommissioning, although it may not be something to worry about now, it can be a real and costly problem. When the cost is calculated on disposing of these materials on a 25 to 50 mile radius of our county, this doesn't really seem realistic to me. Some reports given seem more general than containing facts reflecting our area. I'm asking the zoning board, the county board, and any other board that's going to be reviewing this, please take a close and careful look at everything and make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Units of local government. Anybody out there? Nope. All right. Applicant, Mr. Lucan, do you have any questions?
Ms. Homerding, do you operate a commercial farm on your property?
No.
Thank you.
Other interested parties in the audience? Anybody out there in the audience with questions? Ms. Homerding? Anybody? All right. County staff, do we have anything? All right. Thank you. All right, I've got 7:24. We understand that the next individual that is supposed to speak here is over an hour long. So why don't we go ahead and take 10 minutes at this point? So we'll get going again at 7:35. 7:35. All right, please. All right, as I promised, we were going to sort through the scheduling, whatever we can do with the scheduling. So we're for sure going to do the 16th and 18th. We're also scheduling the 25th of March. Okay, we're definitely striking the 30th and 31st. So strike the 30th and 31st and the 25th of March.
Where? Where? Yeah.
16th and 18th, 16th and 18th will definitely be at this location, Walton Center. And the 25th is to be determined. We'll try to decide whether the venue is available or whichever works out the best. right? Okay, so 16th, 18th here, 25th, it's on the schedule to be determined location. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and get rolling again. Mr. Boomgarden, looks like you're ready to go. So we'll go ahead and get you sworn in and we'll let you have the floor. Mr. Boomgarden, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give in this case now and hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, please state your name and address for our court reporter. And
Dave Boomgarden, 35686 East, 700 North Road, Chatsworth, Illinois. My presentation tonight is mutual lake drainage tile and protection.
Dave, you're next.
Get close. That a little better. Just a little introduction of who I am. A lot of you people in the audience know me. I've been a long-time resident here of Livingston County and in the Chatsworth area. I bought some farm ground in 1972 and started with my first crop in 1973. My wife Anita and I have lived on the same place for 40 years, raised 3 children there. My wife Anita, she taught school for 30 years in the area, starting in Forest and then Chatsworth and then finishing in the Prairie Central School District. I was a farmer for quite a while, and in 1987 I started working for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which was then the Soil Conservation Service, as a soil conservation technician in Ford County. And I was there for 3 years, and then in 1991 I transferred to Livingston County, and I spent 17 years in Pontiac working for Natural Resources Conservation Service as a technician. While I was in Livingston County, I was also responsible for providing training to new Soil and Water Conservation District employees and NRCS employees on a lot of conservation practices, including drainage and terraces and waterways in 10 additional counties besides Livingston. While I worked for NRCS, I had quite a varied experience. I provided a lot of assistance for conservation practices to local landowners. A lot of you have been out on the farm. A lot of the farms in the footprint of the wind farm, both people that are getting wind farms and people that didn't. I worked with a lot of them. I worked with drainage districts as far as coordinating the drainage between the landowners and the drainage districts. I worked with the state and county highway departments. Worked with the Livingston County highway engineer on a lot of drainage projects across roads where we had waterways drainage tile that were impacting the highways. Also worked with the state highway maintenance technician in Pontiac and the state highway design engineers in Ottawa. And I worked on drainage with local landowners that crossed Interstate 55, Highway 24, Route 17, all of the major state highways in the county. Also worked with the township road commissioners. I think over my 17 years I worked with all of the township road commissioners at least once, coordinating drainage problems across the road right-of-ways. As far as the skills I had to do my job with NRCS, one of the jobs I had was comprehensive planning that involved all the resources in the area: wildlife, nutrient management, crop rotation, livestock, designed livestock composting facilities, did a lot of soil conservation practices, engineered practices of terraces, grade stabilization structures, grass waterways. I also worked with some of the towns and villages on drainage issues that were related to affecting adjacent properties, landowners and stuff, and coordinating some of those problems. I worked with the village of Dwight and town of Chatsworth, putting a dry fire hydrant in for the town of Chatsworth, and also did some drainage work with the town engineer when the junior high was built. So I've got a pretty varied experience with drainage and with a lot of different situations with a lot of different organizations and units of government. Some of the soil conservation practices I designed, as I've already said, were terraces, grass waterways, structures. I designed hundreds of those conservation practices. Many of these included tile drainage, especially the terraces and the grass waterways. I actually designed and supervised miles and miles of tile drainage. I'm not a professional engineer, but the way that the NRCS, as a USDA government agency, worked, we had ag engineers that were registered professional engineers with the state of Illinois, and they were able to work with the technicians, and they gave us authority to design practices on our own, all the way from the initial field visit through the survey, design, installation, and then the certification for cost share. And I certified millions of dollars worth of projects here in Livingston County. And kind of before I give an overview of the presentation, I think I need to talk just a little bit of why I'm here and what exactly we're looking at. When Invenergy came to the southern part of Livingston County, there was a lot of neighbors that were looking at getting contracts. Some of them signed contracts right away, some of them got lawyers, some of them never did sign contracts, and there was a lot of coffee talk and different things about what was involved and what kind of concerns you had with that. And in late 2006 and 2007, I was approached by a group of concerned neighbors that had decided not to sign up with Invenergy and had concerns that some of their issues for their protection weren't being addressed. And being I worked in Pontiac, I had a working relationship with Chuck Shoup, and I requested him to set up a meeting with some of the members of the county board. And in January 2007, I did. And I gave a presentation to 3 board members and Chuck Shoup on some of these issues, including other issues that I'm not going to talk about tonight, like aerial spraying and how that impacts non-participating farmers. When I came to realize that the application was going to come in, some of the same group of landowners that had talked to me before suggested that I give another presentation. And I was encouraged by them, and also by some of those are in the footprint, some of them are not. Another group of people that were further west that had concerns about their drainage and how that was going to be affected by this project. I guess about my own farm, I was contacted by Invenergy, and I looked at the pros and the cons. And you know, for several reasons, I didn't sign. And my farm is not in the footprint right now. The nearest tower is about between 3 and 4 miles to the northwest. Several of my neighbors had contracts. I don't know the status of those contracts completely. Invenergy has talked about expansion with several new phases. I really don't know the exact situation of where the land right around my farm is right now. That's where I'm at, why I'm here. And I guess I just wanted to remind everybody of what these hearings are about. And this is a special use permit that's not ag use, for an ag area. And I think when you need to really think about the impacts of the farmer that's trying to stay in the farming business within the footprint, and and hit some of his drainage concerns. And that's what the main goal of my presentation would be tonight. As you were driving here tonight, and don't matter which way you came, you drove by millions of feet of drain tile, worth millions of dollars, that are needed for the ag productivity of this county and this area. And you didn't see a one of them, not one foot. You may be shot over a bridge and you look down and you saw a tile out. But those tile are there, and it's a lot of investment and a lot of future investment, as I'll try to show. So kind of an overview of my presentation. I just want to talk about the importance of drainage in Livingston County. We're going to talk about what mutual aid drainage tile systems are. We want to talk about the construction, operation, and decommissioning of the proposed wind farm and how it can cause damage to these tile. And some of this damage can go on for several years before you really know that it's there, and it could result in crop damage. There's also protection of these mutual aid drainage tiles by Illinois drainage law. And we'll get into that in a lot more detail. And then finally, I was going to show that there's non-compliance with the current application with Illinois drainage law that results in the current application not meeting the county ordinance or the county comprehensive plan. And I guess, for the farmers in the audience, you're going to have a little patience with me because a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about in the beginning lay some background on drainage and stuff. You all know about it, but for the people that don't, I need to start at the beginning, and that's what I did when I taught the new employees. A lot of them didn't have farm backgrounds. They really needed to get an understanding of what drainage was. And obviously, as a NRCS employee, drainage in this area was probably one of our #1 concerns because it affected the productivity of the land and the income potential of that farmer. So the first thing I want to talk about is just the history of Livingston County, a little bit about why it was settled so late. Livingston County was, and this particular slide is directly out of the Illinois Soil Survey. Livingston County was formed in 1837 from parts of McLean and LaSalle County, and the county was named for Edward Livingston. And in late 1800s were a period of major growth in the county. Drainage practices were being utilized to turn swampland into cropland. Agriculture had become a primary industry. And, Illinois had been a state for a long time before Livingston County ever was made into a county. And one of the reasons was a lot of it was swampland. And the railroad came through here in the 1850s, and my farm was deeded from the railroad in, I think, 1855. It was one of the 2 miles on each side of the railroad. And so before that time, there was very little agriculture in this area, even though the state had been in existence for quite a while. And I had a landlord that I farmed 40 years ago, and his great-grandfather settled in the 1850s or the 1860s. And at that time, he could buy a good piece of land for $15 and a poor piece of land for $10 an acre. And so when they were looking at it, they thought they picked out the best land, and they picked out the land south of Chatsworth, where I'm at, because it had a lot of hills. And they could get on those hills and they could plow them and they could raise a crop. And the area of north of Piper City and south of Fairbury Forest was swamp, and nobody wanted it. Well, anybody that farms today know that they made a bad choice. My farm is worth about half what it is here in Fairbury Forest. But at that time, no one could drain it. It wasn't farmable. It was swamp. In this slide week that I have up there, that I just had up there, talked about there was a rapid period of drainage after this was settled. And I don't think you really can grasp how fast that was. But this was something I used in a lot of my presentations, and it It was an article that was in a 1906 Piper City Journal newspaper. And in 1901, Livingston County had the most feet of tile in the state of Illinois. 53 million feet already of tile in this county. That's 10,000 miles. This was all laid by hand to drain this area. Tremendous amount. And I use this example when I was teaching a class because one of the things we did, we had to identify all these tile. And these tile, a lot of these tile are still in existence today. They're still functioning, they're still in operation. They're clay tile. We're 3 generations away from some of these tile when they were installed. Nobody knows where they're at. They're still functioning, they're still providing the drainage that we need, but they're very hard to locate. And a lot of times I work with a farmer and he'd say, well, you know, there's no tile in this area. I know there isn't. My dad lived here, and yet when we would put a new tile in, we would get two or three tile lines. And this is a common experience. Most of the farmers in the area know this, and along with the drainage contractors. There's 2 types of drainage that we need to kind of differentiate between. We have surface water drainage and subsurface drainage and tile drainage. And the surface drainage is just the water that flows up out of the sky and flows down in a field, and it makes ripples and it goes in one direction. And then it comes into contact with another pool of water that's coming in another direction, and of course it gets larger and larger until it gets to a creek. These can be drainage ditches, they can be culverts under a road, they could be grass waterways that you see in a field, shallow surface drainage. They could be structures at the end of waterways that dump water into a ditch, and they could be surface inlets. And I want to talk just a little more about surface inlets. Surface inlets are simply a way to get surface water in a pond or a depression into a tile to take the tile underground and away. And you'll see more of these in the spring as you look around. There'll be ponded waters in the field, and then in a day or two it's gone, and usually there's a surface inlet there that's taking that water away. And that's kind of an important thing to remember as we get into talking about mutual aid tile and some of the benefits of those. And then the subsurface drainage is just that, it's a tile. And in some of the Illinois drainage law, they call it a covered drain instead of a tile. So if I talk about those two, and they're synonymous, they're both the same. The tiling practices when the county was first settled were put in by hand. They went in pretty shallow because they were farming with horses. They didn't have to worry about crushing. They didn't have to worry about a heavy tractor or anything with just horses. And they were mostly random tile lines, and they would go up the wettest draws, and they would make those areas so they could cross them with a team of horses. If the rest of the field was wet, they would wait until it dried and before they farmed it. Very rapidly, these ponds that were completely duck ponds until July, they had to get the surface water off of there, and they would dig a tile through the ridge of the hill and put a surface inlet and get that water out. People became more and more conscious of it, that drainage was really good for productivity, and so in the past, maybe 30 or 40 years, or maybe a little longer, more and more tile systems got more intense, and they went to 90 to 100 foot tile spacing between tile. And at that kind of spacing, you know, on a section of land, 640 acres, there'd be 52 miles of tile. 52 miles in that one section. The current spacing now, and I'll show you some references to this, the current spacing for tile for optimum level of management is 40-foot spaces between tile lines. So a section of land has 130 miles of tile. Tremendous amount of resource out there, and you'll see a tremendous investment. This is a pattern tile system on 40-foot spacings that was put in 2013. It covers 65 acres. There's 70,000 feet of tile with a $65,000 investment. This yellow line here is the outlet tile for this system. Without that outlet tile, it's a 12-inch tile, so it's an existing tile. This other piece here is the railroad right away. Without that yellow outlet tile, that $65,000 investment is totally worthless. There is no outlet, there is no ditch, there's nowhere for that water to go. This is on a different property. So without that, and that's what we'll get into, that's a mutual aid tile. That's a tile that's providing an outlet for another farm, and it has protections under Illinois drainage law. As people looked at making decisions on whether or not to sign up for a wind farm, a lot of the considerations were exactly what we're looking at here today, for these drainage tiles. Now, if this particular piece had a wind farm plan for it in the middle of it, they're going to come in and they're going to excavate that, tear up that tile, pour concrete. They're going to build an access road somewhere. They're going to tear that area up. They're going to put fabric down, put gravel on it. Basically, pretty much destroy this tile system. Now, the people that signed up for the wind farms, they have a right to do that. And obviously, they evaluated the economic risks and the economic benefits, and in their mind, they have decided that it made sense to do that economically on their farm. And that's their right. And I wholeheartedly endorse that and support that. That's their right. Other people saw the same opportunity and they decided not to do it. That was their right. They made an economic decision. When you want to talk about damage, I want to just quote a few things from some of the testimony we've already heard, just to give you an idea. And when I talk about this testimony, you can kind of visualize what would happen on this particular drainage system. And the testimony I'm going to quote was Mr. Engelhardt. And he was from Compton, Illinois. He was a farmer. He had signed up and had wind farms, 5 of them on his property. He was also a township road commissioner. And just to remind people, because some of you weren't maybe here for this testimony, of what he said. And I'm going to quote this. This is on page 1704 of the record. And the first quote I'm going to have will start, quote, "Also the company started construction after Labor Day." Well, you can imagine Northern Illinois after Labor Day. Started to dig up and tear through the fields. And by the time you get to November and December, you've got rainy weather, snow. I mean, it was a total disaster. They had one crane buried, and they took a month to get it out, unquote. And those cranes weighed about 1 million pounds over these tile systems. The next quote is from Mr. Engelhardt, quote, and this is on page 1706. "If you have one of these wind farm projects and you have a farm, can you imagine a 1 million pound crane with a track 6 feet wide going through your fields? If you think your tracks are extra compaction, guess what? You're in for a new surprise. For the next few years, you'll see, if you have GPS or yield map on your combines, you'll see a big difference when you go through these paths. Although they tried to dig it up, it didn't work." End quote. And I have one final quote from him, and this is his final statement of the testimony. And this is on page 1709 of the record. Quote, just to clarify, I have 5 towers. I wish I never did it. I get about 37,000 a year. It's not worth the hassle. I wish I would have never done it. Thank you. And I guess my point here is that there was economic decisions either way. But the consequences are a lot greater than that, because if it was just as simple that one farmer decided to not participate and the other farmer decided to participate, and all of the tile never crossed property lines and weren't interconnected and didn't have protection by Illinois drainage law, it wouldn't be a big deal. But that's simply not the case. We talked a little bit about the investment, and the investment is staggering. Pattern tile on 40-foot spacing is $900 to $1,000 an acre. So a section of land would have $640,000 worth of investment. And this is just for the pattern tile system. This doesn't give you an outlet. This doesn't give you the mains and the sub-mains to get hooked up to get you an outlet. This is just the pattern tile system. Obviously, whether you have this system or you don't have the system changes the value of that farmland in itself. So if you have a tile system, it's obviously going to be worth more. If you have a tile system that isn't functioning, or you don't have that tile system at all, it's going to affect the value of that property. The next slide is just talking about the importance of drainage to agricultural production. And you know, if you're not a farmer, you know, like I said, when you drove in here, you didn't really see all this drainage system. You really didn't understand how valuable this was, or why would somebody spend $1,000 an acre, you know, to drain some land. In this area, a significant amount of Livingston County soils are not feasibly farmed without drainage. You just couldn't even do it. Modern technology has given us some more tools to evaluate the effects of tile drainage on crop yields. And this is a study from Ohio State University, a 25-year study on the effects of pattern tile drainage. And they're showing a 29 to 34% increase in corn yields and a 13 to 46% increase in soybean yields. Drainage will also give you increased efficiency and more time in the field work. Farmers are getting bigger and bigger. They have less days to get the crop in. Drainage gives them that extra advantage to maybe 3 days earlier in the field in the spring, especially in a wet spring. You get better crop rooting and you get more drought resistance and increased nutrient uptake. It also alleviates compaction through better aeration. When you do make a heavy machine out through the field, a combine or something, you don't get near the soil compaction that would limit root growth. The next slide is a slide, it's a University of Illinois Extension Bulletin, 811. And this is optimum crop productivity ratings for Illinois soils. This is a supplement to the Bulletin 810. And Bulletin 810 is the document that all the county assessors use in the state by law to determine soil productivity levels for assessment. And the Bulletin 810 that they use uses average levels of management for all the soil types. All the soil types are rated, and this is what the assessor uses here in Livingston County. This is something that was done after that, and it looks at the optimum level. And there's on this column here, there's a whole list of things that are needed for optimum crop productivity. And the top one is drainage, soil pH, obviously nutrients, type of hybrid, on and on. But the number one thing on the top is drainage. And for optimum productivity, what is their recommendation? Parallel or herringbone pattern tile systems closer than recommended spacing with an adequate outlet. And the key word there is an adequate outlet. We're talking about mutual aid tile that's on somebody else's property that's used for an outlet. In the bottom left-hand corner, it says, intensive drainage systems with adequate outlets are needed for crops grown on naturally very poorly or poorly drained soils. And we're going to see that a lot of the soils in this area of the county and also in the footprint of the wind farm are these soils. They're very poorly or poorly drained. The information on this slide is about prime agricultural soils, and this came from the copy of the Livingston County Soil Survey. I use this a lot in my job. It was a very good tool. And these numbers came right out of the soil survey. There's about 621,000 or more acres of the soils in Livingston County, 93%, which are classified as prime soils. And prime soils are the best soils in Illinois. They're probably some of the best soils in the world. But of that number, over 330,000 acres, or 54% of those prime soils, they require to be drained to be classified as prime farmland. In other words, if they don't have tile drainage systems in them, or those tile drainage systems aren't working, they're not even considered prime farmland. Last week, I went into the assessor's office and I talked to Dwayne Pritzfinger, and I asked him, I said, of all the soils in Livingston County that require drainage to be considered prime, how many of them do you consider prime? And he said, all of them. They're all drained. So the county, they understand that these soils need drainage, and the tile is in them, or they wouldn't be prime farmland. The next slide is Table 5 from the Soil Survey, and this is just a list of all the soils in Livingston County, and not all of these prime farmland soils are in the wind farm footprint, but you can see from this table the soils that are prime because they need drainage. The next is just a sample soil map from the for the Livingston County Soil Survey. And this particular location is a quarter section of land in Township 26 North, Range 7 East, South 23, Section 23, Northeast 1/4. And this is Section 23 in Forest Township. And the little propellers here, those are actually proposed wind farm sites. One is 084 and the other 085. The kind of circle-ish dumps of soil here are the soils that are a little higher. Those are the soils that are prime without being drained or without as extensive a drainage system in them. And they're Elliott, Andrews, and Lisbon soils. And the soil in the drainage ways are all ashcombe soils. This is the soil that needs to be drained to be considered prime farmland, and it amounts to about 70% of that particular tract, and that's pretty typical, I think, for the area of the wind farm. When we talk about tile, we've got to talk a little bit about tile construction materials. And before 1970, almost all the tile were clay tile. They were made from the natural clay. Anybody that's been on the north edge of Chatsworth, there's huge tile ponds there where the clay was extracted to make tile from before 1900. Prinsco has a factory there now that makes plastic drain tile. Millions and millions of feet of tile with both clay and plastic have been made out of that factory to service the needs of the Midwest. Most of the present tile are corrugated plastic. And we're going to, the farmers in the audience will have to bear with me a little bit, but we're going to have to talk a little bit. I'm going to show you a little bit about what we're looking at with those materials and what kind of damage you can get from them, because each one of them has its own own type of damage. This is an old piece of clay tile, and this is probably 4 or 5 inch. They made clay tile up into larger sizes, obviously 16 or 18, 24 inch, but this is a smaller piece. And a lot of these tile are way over 100 years old. On this particular tile, you can see that there was one fracture crack on it already. And if I turn it around the other way, you'll see that in this particular case, this fracture is giving way and it fell in. And this would be very typical of what you would expect with a crushed tile. Enough of a weight load would go over the top of this tile, and this fractured piece here would give way and it would collapse in on itself. The dirt that was covering over the top of this tile may or may not fall in. But this piece of clay tile in here, it immediately changed the drainage flow characteristics of that tile. It changed it a lot. And tile flow is based on the size of the tile and on the grade, how steep it is going down the field, and also the material. The tile like this, it would be smooth on the inside, it would have a better flow characteristic than the plastic tile for the same size. But this is a problem. It's hard to identify. You don't know when it happens. As soon as this happens, it slows the flow of water down. There's clay, sediment in this tile water, and it starts to sediment out behind this and fill this tile. That clay is sticky. It sticks to the bottom of this tile. You can remove this obstruction after a year or so, and that material that's plugging that tile, it won't come out. It's going to stay there. So you've got this type of problem, and you can see that as we talk a little later, we'll start talking about huge traffic patterns that are not typical ag. These tile have never seen a million-pound crane on them. And the damage that you're going to get can be quite severe, as we've already seen Mr. Egelhart testify. This looks like about a piece of 6-inch plastic. As it's being made and extruded, there's a cutter that punches holes in it, small holes in it. You can't see them, but that's where the water infiltration comes into. This has a little different flow characteristic than smooth concrete or clay because of the corrugations in here, and the same size tile at the same grade with plastic would have a little less flow characteristic than clay. But the ease of laying it, the ease of manufacturing, this is the standard today for almost all tile installations. Plastic has a little different characteristic when you put stress on it, weight on it, and this is a piece of plastic. You can see it's egg-shaped. Plastic tile manufacturers suggest that this oblong shape can get to about 20%, 18 to 20% without damaging the integrity of the tile. If you crush this much further, this will split and the thing will cave in just like the clay tile will. There again, if you're doing this with weight, it's very hard to tell. And if you don't dig it up and look, you really don't know whether you damaged it or not. But the constriction, the reduction in tile capacity, the slower drainage is real. Let's let's look just a minute on what kind of damage we can expect from construction activities. The first one would be from trenching or plowing the cables from this wind farm. And I think most wind farms today won't plow in cables anymore, because if you plow in a cable, it's just a knife that slits in the ground and puts the cable in the ground. You cut tile and you don't know that it happened. And I don't think any of the wind farms are using that method. I think all of them are using trenching. It would be an open trench to lay the cable. With diligence, you should be able to see the tile you're cutting. You should be able to make timely repairs with a qualified tiling contractor. Those repairs should be permanent and should be accepted. The biggest problem is the crushing. First of all, as I testified earlier, nobody really knows where these tile are. And I'll go into a little more detail on that on my own farm, my own experiences, but there's some tile maps, you know, when I worked with a farmer, the first thing we were going to do drainage, the first thing I'd say was, where's your tile map, what do you know? And he would sometimes have a sketch or something on a piece of paper from a long time ago that his dad or grandfather gave him. Sometimes he didn't know. Today now we have GPS, all the drainage contractors, GPS on in all the new tile lines. You can find them, you can locate them. That's not the problem. It's the ones that are in 50, 75, 100, 125 years. They're still functioning. They still have protection under mutual aid drainage law. They're still needed for an outlet. They're just very hard to know where they're at. They go through other people's property. They go across township roads. They go across county highways. They go across the major roads, Interstate 55, 24/17. The likelihood of this crushing damage increases with weight, and it also increases with soil saturation. When you have a spring that's wet or a fall that's wet and the soil loses all of its structure, you're going to get more damage. Obviously, if it's July or August and the ground is as hard as a piece of concrete, you could take a 1 million pound crane over it and you're not probably going to do any damage. The wind farms, though, have, on the easement contracts that they've signed with their landowners, they have an unlimited right of ingress and egress any time of the year, 7 days a week, all year long. The landowner can't stop them. They can come in at any time, under any conditions, and operate construction. The participating farmers, they gave away that right when they signed the contract. There again, that was their decision. I support them if that's what they wanted to do. Other landowners and neighbors, they decided not to. It was too risky on their drainage systems. There's basically 3 times in this wind farm operation that's going to last 35 years when you're going to expose these tiles to serious damage. And the first one is in construction. And you're going to be cutting a lot of these tile lines with putting the cables in, and those should be able to be fixed and repaired fairly easily. You're also going to be building the access road. You're also going to be able to, you're also going to have this crane come in and move across this property. And so you're going to have the potential for a lot of crushing. And I think we're going to see that there's no plan to identify crushed tile, period. If there is, I'm not aware of it in any of the documents I've been able to look at. The second one is during operation and maintenance. The wind farm has testified that the lifespan of these wind turbines is about 20 years. And at the end of that time, if there's a potential to repower, they're going to repower. They have an option to go to 35 years. And so it would probably make sense that they would repower. and you're going to get the same type of exposure to compaction again and crushing tile by these million-pound cranes coming in to set the new tower heads. You're also going to have towers that for some reason have mechanical problems and they go down, and you're also going to have a crane come in. And how often that, I suppose, depends on how well the turbines last. And the second time you're going to have this problem is during decommissioning, because you're going to be tearing up the roadways. You're going to be bringing in heavy trucks, heavy equipment to either blast or to jackhammer out the concrete footings under these turbines. You're going to have heavy trucks in the field to haul out the concrete, the gravel from the roadways, the steel and turbine heads components. And all of this is going to expose these tile to potential damage. As I testified, you get tile damage by crushing. It's very hard to identify. And usually you identify it by crop damage. The tile stops, or it slows down enough that it causes damage in the crop field. So you're going to lose some crop before you really know what had happened. This crop damage can be distanced from the tile. In these soils and landscapes, if you go out south of town here, south of Forest, it's very flat. When you damage a tile and back water up, it can back up for a long ways. It can affect drainage for a long distance. That distance will put it over onto another property that may not have to be participating. And this damage, as I testified, can show up months or even years later. If you have that clay tile I showed you and it quartered, and some of the bigger tiles quartered, it might go for several years with just slow down. And then eventually it gets enough so that it causes a major problem. The other potential problem is that the dirt column above that crushed tile will start taking surface water down through it, and you'll end up with all this dirt going down in the tile and plugging it further, and then you'll have a large hole in your field, and you'll be able to identify what the problem was. But until those things happen, the damage has occurred and slowing down the tile flow. The next slide, we're just going to look at what are these weights and what are we talking about. And again, I want to refresh everybody, remind everybody what we're here for. This is a special use permit, non-agricultural use in an ag area. These construction weights are not typical. These are not weights that you would see in an ag situation. For example, a loaded combine, this happens to be a John Deere 9770 with a 300 bushel capacity, and the loaded combine weight is 51,000 pounds. And I picked one of the bigger loaded auger part, 1,100 bushel capacity. This is more capacity than a semi. And it has a weight loaded of about 82,000 pounds. And in the fall, you could probably see some, if it's dry enough, you could see some loaded farm semis in the field, and a 5-axle semi would have a loaded weight of 80,000 pounds. The maximum axle weight for county and township roads during the spring weight restrictions is 7,000 pounds an axle, with a 5-axle semi weight limit of 35,000 pounds instead of 80,000 pounds. And I called the Livingston County Highway Department today, and they put the road restrictions on the county highways yesterday, these restrictions, and I think most of the townships followed. So to protect the roads from damage, from 80,000 pound loads, they've limited them to 35,000 pounds because they know there's going to be damage. The tiles that are underneath these county township roads, they're receiving protection from those weights during the spring thaw when the roads and the soils are soft. They're receiving that protection with these weight restrictions. What kind of loads can we expect from the wind farm construction? And they're going to be in excess of 80,000 pounds. I've seen some proposals and some different things from other areas that the loaded semis that are coming in are 200,000, 220, maybe 280 for some of the components. And these are multiple axles. They're more than 5 axles. They're spreading the load out over a bigger footprint, which helps. But on these saggy county, and not so much county, but township roads, you get kind of a rolling pin effect where you're rolling, actually rolling the force in front of all of this weight. And that's when you're going to get tile damage and crushing on the township roads right away. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. The erection and decommissioning crane that we were talking about, over 900,000 pounds. Most of the things I do when I look would weigh up all the components are about 1 million pounds. I'm not exactly sure what Invinergy is planning for construction cranes, but it probably would be in that neighborhood. Now I'm going to get in, after I've given some background on drainage and why it's important and what some of the problems are with crushed tile, I want to start talking about what the main theme of my presentation is mutual aid tile. And we'll get into the definition, but it's basically a mechanism providing an outlet for acreage that has no natural drain outlet. And this was identified very early in Livingston, or not only in Livingston County, but in the state of Illinois history. And they realized that one farmer could stop the drainage on a whole lot of cropland. And so there was a mechanism put in place to be able to force that landowner and to also to provide mutual aid drainage, and this was codified into Illinois drainage law, and it was for the protection of all the residents, all the landowners in Illinois, and it's still in place today. We're going to look at that in a little more detail. This is, I think it's Boomgarden Exhibit 1. This is a publication called Illinois Drainage Law. This is something that most of the soil and water conservation districts carry. This publication is an extension publication, and it gives a pretty good background on Illinois drainage laws and how to protect yourself and identify your rights and maybe where you're in the wrong. And so it's kind of a down-to-earth summary of what drainage law is and how it affects the drainage in Illinois. And I think I'm not a drainage lawyer, so I'm going to use this document quite a bit. It's kind of in down-to-earth language, and it also has footnotes that actually take you back to the code law in the state of Illinois books. The circular was written by Donna Ruckman, and he's a professor of agricultural law and extension specialist, and Bernard Gevis, who is a research assistant in agricultural law. It's a College of Agriculture, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences publication from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Cooperative Extension Service Circular 1355. In the contents of it, there's 4 sections. The first section deals with Illinois rules of drainage, and this is the only section that I'm going to go into in any detail. It's the one that affects private landowners and the rules that they're mandated to follow. The second part deals with Illinois laws on drainage districts. There are 3 drainage districts in the area of the wind farm. I believe the Belle Prairie drainage district is a large district that drains land in Livingston, Ford, and McLean County, and it's just outside of the footprint today, I believe. It may be in some of the expansion. And then there's Avoca and Indian Grove drainage districts, and I think they're within the footprint. I'm not going to talk a lot about those. Those are units of government. They have taxing authority. They're appointed commissioners. They have permanent easements on those tile and ditches. That law is a little different than what applies to non-drainage districts. They have a lot more protection and a lot more duties to observe those protections. The Belle Prairie District, I did just a little history on it. In 1915, they already had 7 miles of big tile. And the reason for drainage districts was that there was some areas that were so large. Belle Prairie is 6,000 acres, all draining to one spot, all being drained by tile. And the cost of draining all of that was too much for individual landowners, and so the state allowed these drainage laws for districts to be put in place so that they could form districts, they could tax for the benefits and raise money to provide an outlet for a lot more acreages than individuals could do. The third part is drainage regulation of wetlands. A lot of this has to do with the 1985 Farm Bill, which most farmers are familiar with, swamp busting. I was involved in that with my job with NRCS, but that's outside of the scope of what we're talking about tonight. And the last section is the Illinois Soil Erosion and Sedimentation Control Guidelines, and I think Chuck brought this up, the Soil and Water District did for the wind farm. This is the preface of the Illinois Drainage Guide, and I'll just read it quickly. Its purpose is to inform landowners, drainage district commissioners, land improvement contractors, and other interested people of general legal principles related to drainage and the construction of drainage improvements. With this general information, they are better able to recognize opportunities for improving drainage in situations where the drainage rights have been unlawfully impaired. And that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. We're just going to use it as a guide and be able to show where some of the drainage problems have led to violation of some of the potential violations of some of the drainage law. This is a glossary, and I guess I'll just go through it very quickly. There's just a few things I have highlighted there, so that when we talk about this, you'll have some idea of what we're talking about. We have a basin. It's a natural depression that holds water. Water cannot flow out of the basin without an artificial lake. This is basically these ponds I was talking about. We have surface inlets. A ditch is just simply that. It's a artificially constructed open drain or natural drain that's been artificially improved. Dominant land. We'll be talking about dominant and servient land. It's just one is in a higher position than the other. A drain is a ditch and a water course or conduit, whether it's open, covered, or enclosed. So a drain could be a tile, and when we talk about covered drains, it could also be a tile. Drainage structures. The reason I want to mention those is a lot of the surface water is carried underneath the township and county roadways by culverts and bridges, and these will be important later in my discussion. An easement is an acquired right to across or use another property. And this is an important part of the mutual aid drain tile. They become have a permanent easement across the property. The landowner is just that, he's the owner of the land. A mutual drain, and I interchange mutual aid tile and mutual drain in my presentation, and I those are exactly the same. I always use mutual aid because I think it's better, when I was teaching it to new students, it better showed what it really meant. But they're the same definition from my presentation. And we'll get into that a little more detail of exactly what that is. And then the last one is the Serbian land. That's just the land on the lower person in the drainage way. This is page 1 in the Illinois Rules of Drainage. And basically this section says the water runs down here. It's pretty basic. But it's codified in law, and that if you have the higher ground, you have the right to run water down onto your neighbor. And you have to run the water down on your neighbor in the same way that nature would have done it. In other words, you can't change where you run the water off onto your neighbor. It has to go in a certain place. And that's very important when we start looking at some of these wind farm structures and cables and stuff. The tile can only go one place. And it can only go one place because of the lay of the land and also because of Illinois drainage law. You can't change the outlet. You can't go somewhere else and take the water off of your farm onto another neighbor if the natural drainage is in a different way. And basically, it says the basic law recognizes natural differences in levels of land. The basic principle of the law of natural drainage is that landowners take whatever advantages or inconveniences of drainage nature places upon their land. What these advantages or inconsistencies are ultimately depending on the level of one's property in relation to land around it. Basically, what water runs downhill. A landowner must receive surface water flowing naturally from higher ground. One of the most important principles of Illinois drainage law is that the owners of lower ground, known as servient tenement, are bound to receive surface water that naturally flows onto it from higher ground, known as the down. And there's just a little diagram here showing the flow of water. Where the natural flow is from one tract across another tract, the higher land is the dominant tenement and the lower land is the servient tenement. Owners of dominant tenements have legal rights to have their water drain off of their lands. Owners of servient tenements have the duty of not obstructing the natural flow. You can't obstruct the natural flow. This rule means that the owners of farms that are lower than adjoining farms must take the water that flows through natural pressures onto their own land. This is page 2, and I have the highlighted section on the bottom. And this is basically what I was just talking about, where you don't have any choice where you take your water. It says, all lands lying within a natural basin, therefore may be drained into a water course, whether a stream or a mere depression. That drains the basin, and the owners of those land cannot object to this increased flow. The water must be carried by, or can be carried by artificial ditches or by tile lines, but either must drain only the natural basin, and the water must enter the lower land where it would have been in the state of nature. The courts have also held that the substitution of tile for surface drainage does not amount to abandonment of natural drainage rights on the part of the owner. You only have one outlet. You only can go one place. The next slide shows page 7, kind of on the bottom, and this is the statutory enlargement of rules of natural drainage. And this says the right to extend a tile drain across the land of others. Besides codifying the rules of natural drainage, the Illinois Drainage Code provides the owners may extend their tile drain across the land of others when this extension is necessary to protect their drainage and where it meets certain conditions imposed by law. It also sets up a court procedure for securing this drainage. Now, this is a part of the law that I very seldom ever saw used in my experience with drainage for years within our CS and working with other units of government. Everybody realizes that water is a problem and you need to provide an outlet for it. And I don't remember a single case that actually went to court to force somebody to provide an outlet. If the law is there, and I'm sure it's been used, but everybody realizes that if you don't provide an outlet for your neighbor, when it comes time for you to provide an outlet, and you need one in return, you don't get the favor return. So water is a kind of a common enemy in farming and agriculture. But the courts decided that, the Illinois law decided that it was an important enough issue that they provided a mechanism for forcing someone to provide an outlet on their land for another landowner. We're finally getting to the definition of a mutual drain tile. In this slide, it's basically showing a tile line going through 3 different properties and going into a creek. There's hundreds of thousands of these in Livingston County. And that's exactly what a mutual aid drain tile is. This piece of property here, A and B, they have no outlet. The only way they can get an outlet to this creek is through Land C. And the courts and the Illinois drainage laws give these dominant landowners the right to this outlet, and it's protected by drainage law. Drains connected by mutual license or agreement. That's exactly what we're talking about. The second early law enlarging a landowner's drainage rights legalized drains constructed by mutual license, consent, or agreement. Because each drain must be mutual drain constructed for the mutual benefit of all the lands affected by it. And this is figure 2. The code specifies a ditch, a covered drain, which is a tile, where a levee has been constructed by mutual license, consent, or agreement, either separately or jointly by the owners of the adjoining land by makes. And this is the key right here. It makes a continuous line across the lands of such owners, or when the owner of adjoining land is permitted to connect a ditch, covered drain, or levee with another already so constructed. Or when the owner of the lower land connects a ditch or covered drain to a ditch or covered drain constructed by the owner for owner or owners of uplands, or when the owner of land protected by a levee has contributed to the cost of the construction, enlargement, and reconstruction of the levee upon the land. And basically, what the part that we're concerned about here tonight is just tile. It's tile that crosses property lines and provides an outlet. And we're going to look at that a little more detail on the next page. Mr. Boomgarden.
Can I stop you right there? Everybody's getting a little restless. Why don't we take 5 minutes? Take a 5-minute break. I've got 8:47. Come back at 8:52. Hit the bathroom real quick, whatever you need to do, and we'll get going again. I hate to put a break in the middle of it, but at the same time, we're all restless. So, okay. You may continue.
On the things that we have up here, there's some items that are important that I just want you to clarify a little bit. For a mutual aid tile to be important or to be covered by law, it doesn't have to have a written agreement. So just the mere existence of it is all you need. And if a tile is a mutual aid tile, you can't have damage to it unless everybody consents to it. So all the landowners that are upstream, they have to agree to allow damage to that mutual aid tile. We want to talk about the how these mutual tile can be damaging on participating lands. And I think I've already covered a lot of this. You know, you have the potential damage when you have these saturated soils, large weights that are not typical. The crush top can result in crop damage off-site. The participating landowners, they're eligible for reimbursement of crop and drainage tile damage, but the non-participating farmers are not. This tile has a perpetual easement under it that's protected by Illinois drainage law. The same type of problems can happen with the county township roads. They're being analyzed now by Energy for damage of the surface structures under the right-of-ways. These right-of-ways also contain mutual aid drainage tile, and no one is looking at those. No one is going to monitor their damage. If the townships do away with their spring weight limits, the damage will increase. There again, the non-participating landowners have no protection. For a quick example of what we're looking at for damages, this happens to be a 700-acre drainage area, and it happens to be my farm, and it has a very good example within the last 2 years of what we're talking about with mutual aid drainage tile and their impact. Parcel number 4 is my 80 acres that I own. The yellow line are just some of it has an existing 12-inch tile that's probably 120 years old. There's actually 14 parcels that drain through that outlet. That tile, 12-inch tile through my 80 acres there provides all of the drainage for that whole 700 acres. There's only one outlet. It's at the north end of my property where you see the drainage is starting. This old tile is in poor condition. And it's not large enough to completely drain all of this area with mutual aid or with a pattern tile system. And I was approached by a neighbor on parcel number 3 2 years ago to put a mutual aid tile through my farm. It's 2,400 feet. It was 15-inch tile. He wanted to put a complete tile pattern system in on that 150 acres. He paid $50,000 to put that tile through my farm. I paid nothing. It was an outlet that he needed. We stood on the fence and shook hands. I said, you should record that $50,000 tile on my deed, on my farm. He said, we don't need to do that, we're friends. But one of the main reasons that he didn't have to do it is because that outlet is protected by Illinois drainage law, by mutual aid tile. He was approached by 2 neighbors, parcel number 8 and 6, and they paid to have that tile extended from my property line to the road. Section right here, and they paid for that section. They plan on putting a 40-foot tile spacing system in the future. If you look at the potential damage, if I was to put a wind farm turbine on my parcel on track number 4, there's a 12-inch tile there, there's this 15-inch tile there. If they were damaged, they would affect drainage on a large area of the 700 acres. And I'm prevented from doing that by Illinois drainage law. That tile, both of those tile, are protected by a permanent easement, and I cannot damage those without the consent of all the people upstream. And so it doesn't have, or there's no way that when they come in with these cranes, that they're going to come back and look and see whether they crush these tile. They could get a quarter, they could get partially crushed in plastic, and there's no real way of knowing that they do impact the drainage. I've also identified some tiles that cross under the road 3500 east and 600 north. These are 4 more tiles. These all connect into the existing 12-inch tile. They're all on the right-of-ways. They all have protection, perpetual easement under Illinois drainage law from protection of being crushed. If this was a haul road for the wind farm, Invenergy isn't going to look for those tile, and those damaged tile won't be found. This is a small example of one of the problems that come up with where these cables are going. Invenergy is looking at putting a cable in at 5 feet. And if you look at the 15-inch tile that I just talked about, 15-inch plastic tile, with 3-foot cover on it, which is what Illinois Drainage Guide is looking at, especially for mains from 2.5 to 3, probably 3 foot for mains. You're going to have the 15-inch tile only 6 inches away from Invenergy's cable. The green is where the foot difference will be. Invenergy is looking and wanting to maintain a foot difference between the bottom of the tile and their cable. The drainage districts have tiles that are 36 and 42 inches, and you can see the cable goes right through the middle of it. So at a 5-foot depth, we're going to be limited to 10-inch tile. The next slide I want to talk about is Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 9, the proposed agriculture impact mitigation agreement. This is the same proposal is also in Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 125. Pleasant Ridge 125 is a response to a letter from Belle Prairie Drainage District Commissioners, and the response that Invenergy gave is basically the agriculture impact mitigation agreement that's the same as exhibit number 9. I've also entered in as Boomgarden Exhibit 4 the original letter from Belle Prairie Drainage District. This wasn't included in Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 125 originally. They just gave the response. The Drainage Commissioners asked that I put this into testimony. I'm not a spokesman for the Drainage District, but I was just asked to include that so that you have a reference of what the concerns were. A lot of their concerns are the same as what I'm proposing for private land.
Mr. Boomgarden, with regard to that Boomgarden 4,
yes.
Did you hand that out? Do we have that? Or?
Yes. It was on top of the stack of papers. I showed it to Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, it's also already a county exhibit.
It is a county exhibit.
This is additional.
I don't recall which one it is, but the Belle Prairie letter is a county exhibit.
Okay.
Yes, I said it was exhibit. It's exhibit 125.
Yeah, and there's
But the original letter is not in
It's a county exhibit. It's in the record of this proceeding.
pulled into county exhibit.
Do I have Boomgarden 5-4? Yes, I do. Is there a Boomgarden 3?
Yes.
Okay.
I reviewed the proposed mitigation plan proposed by Invenergy. This has been supported by Illinois Farm Bureau and the Illinois Department of Ag. And a lot of the recommendations and the standards in here are the same as that I used when I worked for NRCS. They're very standards that are industry standards. And it goes, as far as it goes, it's a very good document, but there are some limitations to it that I'd like to point out. And on page 5, it basically says that the developer will work with the landowner to identify these tile lines, and they're going to stake them and flag them. But that's only if they're known. So we're back to the problem of not knowing where these tiles are. In the second bullet, they say that they're going to repair the damaged tiles that are cut by trenching. They'll be staked, and there's a procedure for repair. There again, there's no way to look for crushed tile or damaged tile by these weights. Bullet 4 is basically the same thing. It sets up the repair for cut tile, but there's nothing in there for tile that were crushed by these weights. And then number 5 is basically their 1 foot of separation between tile and the cable, and a 5 foot depth for the buried cable, which in the slide before shows that that's not really adequate for anything more than 10-inch tile. In the recitals, which are part of the first part of the litigation agreement, there's one that says, whereas the developer and the county wish to set forth their understanding agreement as to issues related to the construction and operation of the project, but there's no mention of decommissioning and any of the damage that would be caused there. Also, I would like to look at the definition section of this agreement. Under the landowner definition, it's a person that has an ownership interest in property that is used for agricultural purposes that is party to an underlying agreement. When you go to an underlying agreement, it basically says you have a contract with Invenergy. Well, that's fine, except that the drainage district that was asking about this, they're a unit of government. They're not party to any agreement with Invenergy, and so they're excluded. And none of the non-participating farmers that are having their tile damaged, their mutual aid tile damage is protected under Illinois law. They don't have an underlying agreement. So a large part of the people that are receiving damage within the wind farm are excluded from this proposal. And if you look at the acreages that Invenergy has put forth, 62% of the landowners within the footprint are participating and 38% are non-participating. But there's a large portion just outside of the footprint that have tile that drain into the footprint. And all of those people are non-participating, and they have potential drainage problems. And so the actual percentage of people that are affected is much closer to 50-50. And this slide just shows you about how much draining back into the wind farm footprint. There's about 60 miles of perimeter around this, and all that acreage, some of it being both Indian Creek and the South Fork of the Vermilion are inside of the footprint. A lot of the drainage is towards that, so the drainage from the outside is in, and those people are also going to be exposed to damage. As I said, that there's no provisions for identifying and repairing the crushed tile on participating landowners or on county highway right-of-ways. So there's no protection for non-participants from crop damage resulting from that crushed tile, and this is protected under mutual aid drainage law. These are the conclusions I've drawn from the presentation. Drainage is a valuable asset to agriculture in Livingston County. We saw the huge investment. Mutual aid drainage tiles are all interconnected, benefiting multiple landowners, providing drainage outlet for land that has no natural outlet. And the current application provides no protection from damage and resulting crop damage is affecting non-participating landowners, either on participating landowners' land or on county highway right-of-ways where the tile crosses underneath those. And Illinois drainage law provides permanent easement for these outlets. The current application doesn't comply with the county ordinance or the comprehensive plan. And looking at non-compliance with the county ordinance. Chapter 56 of zoning, wind energy, section 56.618, design and installation. Item I, compliance with additional regulations. Nothing in this article is intended to preempt other applicable state and federal laws and regulations. And I have shown where Illinois drainage law, the actual codes where we talk about the potential violation. This is the decommissioning plan in the county ordinance, section 56.624. Number 3, the provisions for the restoration of soil and vegetation, and then financial assurance secured by the owner for decommissioning. This is part of the ordinance. I want to look at Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 28 of the decommissioning plan. Under topsoil restoration and revegetation, there's no mention in there of any cost for damaged tile, not only on participating but non-participating farms. There's no mention of it whatsoever. Continuing on Pleasant Ridge 28 on the decommissioning plan. On the bottom of the page there, it explains that they had an obligation with the landowners with their original contract to provide decommissioning, and a fund would be set aside. And then in the second part of it, it says that this will be superseded by whatever is agreed to with the county. So we're going to look at what Invenergy proposed then for the county application, because that supersedes the original contract with the landowner. In the decommissioning cost estimate summary, which is a continuation of Exhibit 28 under decommissioning, under topsoil replacement or rehabilitation, there's a lump sum for $1 million. I can find no amount in the decommissioning cost for any tile repair, tile damage by crushing. We've got the same cranes coming over the same land. We've got the roads being tore up, but I see no dollar amount in there. It was kind of surprising that I didn't see anything in there for crop damage during decommissioning for the participating landowners. Some quick calculations of some potential estimates: 4 acres around the wind turbine for the roads on each side for driving the crane. You come up with over 1,000 acres of crop damage during decommissioning, somewhere $800,000, $900,000 crop damage, which is not accounted for in the decommissioning at all. There's no mention of it. And basically, this next slide is going to talk a little more about it in a little more detail. We talked about all this extra drainage that's going in, 40-foot tile spacing. So when this crane comes back 35 years from now, it's not going to be going over the tile that are there today. It's going over the tile that are going to be there 35 years from now. We're seeing a huge amount of more tile going in, so there'll be more damage, and yet there's no provision for any damage in the decommissioning. And there's no provision for any crop damage resulting from these crushed tile. Looking at non-compliance with the comprehensive plan. The only part of the comprehensive plan that I'm looking at is the agricultural portion of it. Under the initial part, they're looking at preserving prime farmland, and obviously we showed that prime farmland in this area needs to have drainage on it, and the destruction of that tile drainage is going to impact prime farmland. If you go down a little further, there's an area where it says that ensuring that agriculture in that area is going to be able to be maintained and preserved, and by not protecting the tile drainage that's necessary for crop production, it's simply not going to be maintained. If you look at the planned purpose, in 3.2, it's to preserve prime farmland. If you don't protect the drainage, both of the participating and the non-participating farmers are not going to have prime farmland. In the updated version under agricultural land use, there's more discussion there about preserving the prime farms land. They're using modern technology. Obviously, all this new tile drainage and the cost involved in it, and we're looking at this 35 years from now during the decommissioning too. And my final slide is from the forward of the Livingston County Comprehensive Plan. And I'll take the liberty just to read this. It says, most of the land in Livingston County is privately owned. Although we have a strong tradition of private property rights in the country, we also recognize that there must be limits to the use of an individual piece of property. And they give some examples there. And I guess the whole part of my presentation really comes down to, this is a special use permit in an ag area. And obviously, the landowners that want to have a tower, get the income, county government, taxes to the county and schools is important. But in an ag area, the drainage of it, and the drainage is protected by Illinois drainage law, is also a right that needs to be respected. And I think that the present application of Invenergy fails in a lot of those regards to take care of the drainage needs of the non-participating landowners. Mr. Cannell? Thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to present this presentation. Thank you.
All right, local government with questions for Mr. Boomgarden. Local government, all right. Mr. Blazer, Mr. Luginians, you guys have any questions for Mr. Boomgarden?
I do, sir. Mr. Boomgarden, it was just put into the record today, so I think I know what the answer to the question is, but have you had any chance at all to read Livingston County Soil and Water Conservation District Exhibit 1, the Natural Resource Inventory Report that was prepared by the SWCD?
No, I did not.
Okay. Your slide number 20, which is the one that talks about weights across tiles from different types of vehicles.
You would like to get that back up? Or?
You can just, I mean, we don't have to. Okay, I just want to refer to it for you.
All right.
And you've got weights for various types of vehicles.
Yes.
All right. And those are gross vehicle weights, right?
Yes.
So, for example, a loaded combine, the 51,000 pounds, what's the weight per square inch of that loaded combine?
I'm not sure. And I think I testified that there were different amounts of axles, and so that definitely impacts the weight per square inch. I think I mentioned that.
Right. So I assume your answer would be the same then for one of the cranes, the 900,000 pound crane. You have no idea what the weight per square inch is.
No.
The combine is on Is that on tracks or on wheels?
It could be either one.
How about the crane? Is that on tracks or on wheels?
Talk to the microphone.
Yes, I believe the crane is on tracks.
How many drain tiles were damaged in the construction of the Cayuga Ridge project in the Williamson County?
I don't think anyone knows. You know, they're not identified yet, and the damage will still be coming.
How long has, when was the construction of that project completed?
I'm not sure. 3 or 4 years ago.
Do you know when it went into operation?
No, I do not.
Do you know if any claims of violation of Illinois drainage law were asserted against the owner or operator of that project after it was constructed?
I do not.
Same questions with respect to the White Oak project in McLean County. Do you know how many drain tiles were damaged in that project?
I do not.
Would your answer be the same for the Grand Ridge project in South County?
Yes, it would.
The California Ridge project in Vermilion and Champaign counties?
Yes.
The Bishop Hill project in Henry and Stark counties?
Yes.
And do you know of any claims of violation of Illinois drainage law that were asserted by anyone against the owner and operator of any of those projects?
No, I do not. And I also do not know what their policy was on this either. I have no way of knowing that.
Do you know who the owner and operator of Grand Ridge, California Ridge, and Bishop Hill is?
I believe it's Energy.
Do you have any knowledge of what discussions have been ongoing regarding drain tile repair in the context of negotiations for the road agreement between Energy and the 9 townships?
Limited only to what I know as being a resident of Chatsworth Township.
So, but you obviously haven't been privy to or a party to any?
No, I have not.
Okay. And the agricultural impact mitigation agreement, our Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 9, you're aware that that's a draft that's been presented to the county, right?
Yes, I understand that. I was just pointing out the deficiencies in it.
All right. And then one final thing. You had said that your residence is 3 to 4 miles from the nearest turbine to the northwest.
I believe so, yes.
You're aware that's turbine 79?
I'm not sure what turbine number it is.
And if I told you that you're actually over 5 miles from that one, would that come as a surprise to you?
No, not at all.
Have you spoken to any farmers in the area of the Cayuga Bridge project who have ongoing complaints about damaged tile that wasn't repaired?
Could you repeat that? I didn't get the first part.
Have you spoken to any farmers in the area of the Cayuga Bridge project who have claims regarding broken?
Which project?
Cayuga Ridge.
Oh, no, I did not.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Luke, answer any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. Obviously, the wind turbines are not very close to your particular house, correct?
No, they're not.
Okay. But you still came here to testify as to this issue of drain tiles, correct?
Yes, the original Met Tower for Energy was a mile from my farm, so obviously that land was signed up originally. I believe other landowners within a half a mile were signed up around me. I have no knowledge of the expansion, whether they're going to come into my property or not. That was
But I guess my point is, even though these wind turbines are 5+ miles maybe away from you, we don't know if they're 3 or 5, doesn't matter to you. You came here to testify not because of the effect on your personal property, but because of the effect on the county as a whole. Is that what I understand?
That's exactly right, and I'm here at the request of quite a few of the landowners that are within the footprint. They asked me to speak on their behalf.
So you really don't have much of a personal issue from a financial position in this?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Anybody in the audience with questions for Mr. Boomgarden? Got two at once here. Mr. Hayes, if you got several or just one or two, you can jump up there and grab the mic real quick. Hold on, Carol.
John Hayes. Do you think this information would be something that the road commissioners ought to consider in your presentation tonight?
I think they are considering it.
Have you discussed any of this material with any of the road commissioners?
I have.
Are any of those road commissioners here tonight?
I'm not sure.
Would you mind just taking a quick look around and see if you see anybody?
Raise their hands, please stand up.
I'm not sure. The ongoing negotiation between the townships, the county, and Energy is a private matter. I'm not party to it. Like Mr. Blazer said, I'm not sure. I would hope they would be considering these issues.
Well, are you aware whether or not they have been advised not to listen to your presentation tonight?
No, I do not.
Thank you.
Carol.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Gerwin. I have a couple quick questions. One is, just for the record, are you being compensated for your testimony tonight or for making a report?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Okay. And you didn't do it as part of your job or anything like that?
No, I've been retired for 8 years.
Okay. When there is a problem with drainage tile, is that recorded somewhere? Is there a database? How would you know? How would you look it up?
Not that I know of. You mean as far as it relates to a wind project? You mean?
Or any project? I mean,
No,
is there any record?
there is no record. No, none that I know of. In my 20 years working with drainage, I know of no record that's being kept.
So the drainage districts don't track that?
Well, drainage district is a unit of government. They are operating under different laws, and they're a unit of government, and I'm not familiar with their operation.
Okay. How soon would problems be likely to show up from the time that there is a crushed tile in your experience, if you know?
You really don't know, because the damage could be minor, it could be severe. Repeated damage would speed up the process. Mobile trucks, that's the big unknown that causes a concern.
Well, I'm totally ignorant, so would it be more than 6 months, less than 6 months, more than a year? Just any ballpark idea?
Mr. Chairman, the witness has already testified that he doesn't know.
No, he didn't. That's not what the testimony is, and for once I wish Mr. Blazer would quit.
Just let me answer the question. Just let me answer the question.
Could you repeat that?
The question is, how soon would we know if a tile that is crushed, let me back up, sorry. Do you have any experience, do you know how long it would take in a range, either a range or an average time? Just a ballpark.
I can answer that question. If you completely crush a tile and it's operating at full capacity, the damage is going to show up very soon, probably within hours, days, if it's running full. If it's dry, the damage isn't going to show up at all. And so from there on, the answer to your question is it would depend on too many variables. It could be many years, especially if we're looking at sedimentation.
Do you know whether ag insurance covers damage to tile?
The only way I think that ag insurance
would be, that would cover that would be like a drainage contractor that would damage a tile or do an inadequate repair or something, and that would fall under their liability insurance. But I don't think there isn't anything that would fall under the other category.
So a non-participant, even if they have regular insurance, would not be protected by that insurance?
Not for tile damage.
Do you have any information on how often wind companies come in to do repairs and maintenance during the course of the operation of the wind farm?
I don't have any first-hand knowledge on that. I just went by what Energy proposed in their decommissioning, that the life of the turbines was 20 years. There would be a complete repower, which would require bringing in all the equipment, I guess. But other than that, the maintenance in between time, I'm not familiar with that. Obviously, on the other wind farms, I see that going on.
Does the AIMA apply to residential property?
I think it's agricultural land.
And that is all I have. Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience with questions? Anybody else out there? Got one in the back. Oh, we got a couple, it looks like. Grab your mic over there and state your name for us real quick.
Lance Jednak. I'm curious, do all the farms have the 40-foot tile? Are they all put in 40-foot increments? Or is there a lot that might have almost no tile in it or 100-foot apart?
I think you'll find the whole range of spectrum, although in this area where the wind farm footprint is, this is fairly flat. There's a lot more tile than that in other parts of the county, and the trend is to go to 40-foot tile spacing in the future. That was my testimony, that when decommissioning comes, we're going to be looking at a different tile profile out there than we are today.
Okay, and I guess that's kind of where the question came from. That one of your slides you had shown, I think it was 3200 North Road East. It looked like it was a very highly tiled parcel, and I didn't know if that was a participating parcel or is that just an example of what it could be.
I'm not sure which slide you're referring to.
You had a slide in your presentation that showed a tile, a typical tile.
Oh,
tile.
The 70-acre one initially.
Yeah,
that was 40-foot tile space.
Okay, is that actually an existing one?
Yes, that was installed in 2013. Yeah.
Is that one of the pieces of property that is proposed to have a wind turbine on it?
No, it's not.
Okay, I was just wondering about that. Also, does tile naturally deteriorate? I mean, it's not just where wind farms are going to be or where equipment might go over. It can happen naturally, right? I mean, there's a lot of tile companies that go out and just fix tile all the time.
Absolutely. And I guess my discussion on that is that we're not talking about typical ag operations. We're talking about special use permit that's allowing other heavy equipment in there. Obviously, if there wasn't a concern, the county board would have required the township's roads and stuff to enter into these special use permits because they know there's going to be damage.
Okay, and I guess it's still towards your testimony, but just for instance, I think for information, I don't know what the pounds per square inch is on, a loaded grain truck or a combine. Just like a 16,000 crane, which is one of the ones that some of our, guys that are in my trade operate. I believe it's like 25 pounds per square inch is what it ends up being. That's almost a 1 million pound crane. concrete, so it's spread out pretty evenly. And being, I was on a few of them projects, we really didn't have a lot of tiles that were damaged that, and we did have crews out there right away to go along with the farmer when we were going through his field, and he would say, let's take this, and if there was a wet spot that came a few days later, you know, it would get fixed by a local tile company. So, I mean...
Objection, vote to strike. Can I have a question?
Yeah, can we avoid the testimony?
Okay, well, I was commenting on the weight of machines and the...
Sure, but question for
Can I respond to that?
We're not actually allowing any of that.
Okay.
So, no.
Sorry.
Question?
Sure.
Question?
Sure. And then the damage to a non-participating farm, would the damage be just the possible of a backup if a tile downstream was crushed, or are you saying that tile upstream might actually explode or something based on a wind turbine going downstream?
No. What I was talking about was a real life situation would be is once the tile is damaged on a participating farm that's providing an outlet for an upstream landowner, especially if that was draining a basement, a pothole full of water. You know, you have about 2 days to get all of that water out of there. It's surface water. That's where the real damage comes. It can be a fairly large acreage, and it can happen very quickly.
Okay, thanks for your clarification. No, nothing more from me.
Thank you. I believe we have another PA had some questions. Please state your name for us.
Amber Severson.
Thank you.
I have a question pertaining to your slide where you showed the different sizes of drainage tile. I believe it was, if my memory serves me correctly, 10-inch, 12-inch, 15-inch, and 36-inch tile. My memory serves me correct? I was in, as someone who doesn't know about tile depth, it was interesting to me that the surface of the tile is at a 3-foot depth. So underneath the top of the soil, and that Invenergy said that they were going to be 1 foot away from tile. I found that interesting that you said that a 5-foot depth, they would go right through a 36-inch tile, so they wouldn't be 1 foot underneath it or above it. And I think in the actual agreement or the application they put in, they said that they're only going to, the application says they're going to put it in at a 4-foot depth, but they're having continued negotiations and said they're going to put it in at a 5-foot depth. So technically, to be in that 1 foot range, they would have to put their cables at 7.5 feet to be underneath that 36-inch tile, right?
That's correct, and that's one of the concerns I think that the drainage districts expressed, and the one that I expressed here is that if you're a non-participant and you're having to get a mutual aid tile to a participant, and you're paying for that tile, and there's 147 miles of this cable strung all over this wind farm, it's at 5-foot level, who's going to pay to move this cable? There's no document that shows what Invenergy is going to cost or charge you to move that cable, if it can be moved, or if you're just going to have to do without a drainage outlet altogether. And of course, drainage law provides you to have that drainage and can force the issue, but I don't know at what cost and I don't know the procedure. These are things that need to be discussed and addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? I got a question back there.
Hi, Roger Metz. You mentioned and referred to the decommissioning set aside of about $1 million.
And my question?
I just lost it. My question is, in reference to that, is that indexed for inflation or is that a fixed amount? And in your estimation, would costs be greater in 35 years or less?
I believe
believe that, from what I've read, that this will be indexed every 3 years.
So it will accommodate.
It will. The only problem is that if you have zero in the decommissioning fund for tile damage or crop damage, you index zero and you get zero. Any other questions from the audience?
We've been talking about tile repair.
Oh, okay. You know, we've been talking a lot about tile repair as it goes to automatic. Is it all that needs to do correctly repair a tile?
Well, as I testified, the agricultural mitigation impact agreement has some pretty good standards in there for repairing tile that have been cut or severed. There's provisions for bridging across with channel iron stuff, and if that is done correctly, and it can be a very efficient way of doing it. My concern is that all of the crushed tile, none of those are being looked at, and especially during decommissioning, there's not even $1 in there for anything for tile repair or for crop damage, and so those are amounts and issues that need to be addressed.
Is it possible to tell how far back the tile has been damaged? If a tile is quartered, maybe the next one is quartered, the next one?
Well, you know, without digging up and looking at it, you're not going to know. I mean, that's basically the bottom line. And you know, when you're in the future, when you're talking about decommissioning or coming in to repower, and somebody in the last 20 years since the wind farm has been constructed has put in these 40-foot tile spacings, you're going to be going over a tile every 40 feet.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience?
And Bureau Rosses, I just have 2 questions. There was a local 150 operator that testified about helping the farmer. I think he said up to 6 weeks, trying to help make him happy, I think he said. I think one of those things was fixing tile. I don't know if you know, but are local 150 operators certified to fix tile?
I'm not sure. No, I don't know. I think some of the agreements are looking at trying to have local tile contractors do the repair. But I don't know where that negotiation is at.
Okay, I think he said up to 6 weeks, trying to make it happy. It's 1 month. And that road commissioner that you quoted up north, I can't remember where he's from. I think he also testified that they dug up a tile where he's having a problem and they fixed it, but they fixed it with, I think he said a 6-foot piece of white PVC.
Yes, I remember that.
I mean, in your opinion, is that a properly fixed tile or white PVC? I guess I only know that to use household drainage.
Yes, I think probably the material was the wrong material, and probably a bigger issue was it didn't have an adequate connection, so the connection probably separated because it wasn't like material. So I don't know that, but that would be if I was going to speculate.
Okay, so thank you.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, my name is Jerry Kramer.
I want to know if all this 40-foot spacing and all this excess tiling, will it cause elevated river levels and flooding for people further downstream? You know, in the future? Will this cause other people problems by this excess tiling and the farmers benefiting by, you know, increased yields and things like that? Aren't they affecting others?
That would be beyond my expertise, David. So.
And mine too. That's a good question. That's one thing I have. Also, I was wondering, prior to all the farm ground being tiled, wasn't there wildlife living in these swamps and these wetlands? And we're all worried about constructing wind towers due to we're going to harm the wildlife. And I mean, you guys started to tile and everything, taking care of, you know, the wildlife itself. And my question is, by grading the farm ground, did that affect the wildlife that used to exist there?
Well, if you're talking about it that existed in the 1850s, I'm sure it did.
Sure. So when did the problem start? You know, now that we're installing these wind farms, or when we started to drain the ground to begin with? You know, so it's kind of a double-edged sword, you know, what we're all talking about. Would you agree?
No. I didn't know what the question was.
My question is, draining the farm ground, you know, in the early days, did that affect wildlife?
I think I testified that it did.
Yeah, there you go. So like I say, we could look at this from two different sides. Thank you.
Anybody else with questions? Questions? Anybody else? Do we have anything? Staff, do we have anything? All right. All right, Mr. Boomgarden, I appreciate you coming and speaking with us. All right. All right. We're meeting again 16th, 18th, 25th, 6:30 here. I'm going to go through about 10 names. Certainly if you're one of these 10, be prepared to go on the 16th. Linda Ambrose, Jerome Kurtenbach, Dwayne Schneider, Rick Miller, Rebecca Fair, Julie Fosdick, Suzanne Bell, Karen Brands, Larry Fosdick, Roger Brown, Carol Weibel, Julie Newhouse, Robert Lenz, and Dave Boomgarden, who's got it. So those are the first order that we're going to take on the 16th. So with that, I need a motion to recess. Been some motion.